A very good afternoon, and on behalf of the Arab Image Foundation and the Victoria and Albert Museum's Culture in Crisis programme, I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Werner Rapley, and I'm the Director of Cultural Heritage Protection and Security at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and I'll be your host for today's event. As you know, the events from the event invitation, we will be discussing archive collections in crisis. And we're joined today by three archival institutions working across the Middle East and North Africa to discuss emergency planning, implementing disaster management strategies, and working towards sustainable recoveries. 6 months on from the terrible explosion in the Port of Beirut, this event will reflect on how best to protect collections and colleagues amid continuously challenging contexts whilst facing compounding crises. This afternoon, we have an ambitious programme and an intent to address the varied nature of collections from photographs to film and books, manuscripts, built heritage and the digital, and highlight the approaches and experience of organisations in protecting tangible and intangible heritage. We also want to discuss the creation of emergency plans, the use of technological safeguards, training and resources, as well as the importance of proactive collaboration and the investment in sustainable safeguarding. So before we move on, I just wanted to say a little bit about our audience today. We had over 300 registered attendees, and we're joined by many of you today, and I know many others will be looking to watch this as a recording later on. We've got a large number of students with us and also people from funding organisations, but we've been most pleased to see the geographic spread of people attending today from so many countries around the world, from New York to Aruba and from London to Indonesia, as well as a really solid participation from the Middle East and North African regions. I'd also like to extend a welcome to our friends who've joined us in numbers today from the British Library, and of course our thanks to my colleagues who join us from the Victoria and Albert Museum, and a special thank you to Laura Jones, our Heritage Protection Lead, and Rachel Dedman, the Jamil Curator for Contemporary Art from the Middle East, who've made the event possible today. I'd also like to extend a special thank you and a welcome to our first time attendees of the Culture in Crisis programme. Please join us again, and at the end you'll find a way to sign up to our mailing list so that you can learn about our future events. The Culture in Crisis programme is committed to trying to bring together a multiplicity of voices to heritage discussions, to share our thoughts and experiences, and most importantly, collectively work to better understand the positive role that cultural heritage protection can play. We actively encourage participants to join in the conversation via our chat today. Hopefully you can all find the chat function there. And that will be monitored by Laura, so we can bring out relevant questions and comments to discuss later on today. We'll also be using the hashtag Culture in Crisis Conversation so that people can get involved both now and afterwards on social media. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our speakers today. They come from across the Middle East and North Africa, and we're really pleased today to be joined by four distinguished speakers from three different organisations. And in a moment, I'm going to ask each of them just to briefly introduce themselves. And then at the same time, please use the chat function to introduce yourselves as the audience so that we know who you are and where you're from. And then each of our organisations will make a short presentation to explain their role and lead us into a roundtable discussion, and then hopefully plenty of time for you to become actively engaged with questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, I shall hand over to our first speaker today. Just to introduce yourself, Heba, please.
Thank you, Vernon, and thank you to the entire team of the V&A Culture in Crisis for having organized this platform to commemorate 6 months of the Beirut port disaster, but I'll tell you more about that shortly. I'm the director of the Arab Image Foundation, and I joined recently, just over 6 months ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Heba. And maybe if I could hand now to Ali.
Hi everyone. Thanks to VNA and HIPAA and Arab Image Foundation for the invitation. Culture in Crisis. Just for the introduction, my name is Ali Al-Adawi and I'm mainly working the curator in Wakalat Bihna in Alexandria, mainly for cinema and visual art projects.
Fantastic. And Yasmin?
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Yasmin Hussein. I'm the M&A consultant at Bihna, Wakalat Bihna in Alexandria, Egypt, and the responsible director of the archive project. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And last but no means least, Hadia. And I'm hoping Hadia can hear us. So we had a few technical difficulties. Hadia, I can see your icon. Are you able to unmute yourself? Ah, there we go. I can see Hadia now.
Fine now. Yeah. Yes, I'm Hadia Ghana, director of the Beit Ali Ghana Foundation in Libya. And thank you for the invitation, and sorry for this little technical problems. I hope it will be better now.
Thank you. Well, we're very pleased you could join us, and we're grateful to you for fighting through the technical difficulties to be with us today. It's amazing that we can now bring together people from so far afield to have these conversations and to get everybody involved. So before I hand over to the first of our speakers today, just like to remind our audience, please, to join in the discussion. We're really interested. We've got a really informed audience. I would love to hear your views, questions, and comments. So please include them in the chat function. And I see that Laura has already put up there the email address should you wish to join the Culture in Crisis mailing list for those of you who join us for the first time. So I'm going to turn first of all to Heba to introduce the Arab Image Foundation and your work there.
Thank you, Vernon. I'm just going to share the PowerPoint presentation that I've prepared. Can you all see it?
Yes, that's very clear.
Great, thank you. Well, I'd just like to say the topic of the day is about crises and disasters, but actually our life is not all a disaster. And so that's why I wanted to start by telling you a bit more about the Arab Image Foundation. What is it that we hold dear at this foundation? What happened in August 2020? And how did we respond to that crisis? And what have we learned from this disaster? And how do we, in our practice, prepare for emergencies? And what's next for us? So I'll walk you through the PowerPoint presentation. And if at any moment you can't hear, or if there's any glitch, please let me know. So the Arab Image Foundation was established in 1997 as an independent association for photography and image practices. At the time, Lebanon was undergoing a period of reconstruction. Remember, this was 15 years. This was after 15 years of civil war, and several artists realized the dire need to preserve the region's photographic heritage. And this is in the absence of public support. There were no structures. There were no hosts to preserve any such collections. Out of this initiative of these artists and researchers, AIF was founded. And over the past 24 years now, our mission has been to collect, to preserve, to study photographs from this region, the Middle East, North Africa, as well as the Arab diaspora. And what's interesting is we work at the intersection of artistic creation, research, and archiving. And through that, we explore, we question, and we confront some of the complex and political realities of our time. We currently have in our custody over 306 collections amounting to more than 500,000 photographic objects. And by objects, I mean negatives, prints, glass plates, albums, and studio objects. And these collections come from different sources. Some are family photographs, others are photo studios, professional photographers, and vernacular ones. These are some, I'll slide you through some of the objects that we have. These are from family collections. This is from studio collections, photography collectors. And incidentally, this very picture actually is an image of the Port of Beirut in the 1920s. So a flashback to that era. Images from Arab diaspora collections. These particular ones are from Mexico. Now, what I should explain is that AIF doesn't function as a conventional archive, but rather as a bridge between archival and contemporary artistic practices. And so we continue to review our approaches. Nothing is sacrosanct, and we really rely on other people's experiences to do our job better. What is also particular is we don't think of photographs as mere images, but we see them as objects, each with a unique set of physical attributes. And so the information on each photograph is another layer that we do our best to preserve and highlight. In terms of conservation, our work is focused on preventive measures. So we don't do any complex reconstructive treatments, but we do dry or wet cleaning to minimize further deterioration. So we don't interfere with the item or change its appearance. In this image, for instance, you see how one particular photograph used all kinds of material to hold and to house the negatives. So we try to preserve this craft as well as the image. This approach to conservation is also reflected in our digitization. We capture unique qualities of every object and in its different layers. I'll show you some images. An essential part of our mission is actually giving access to our collections for artists, researchers, and those passionate about image and the crafts around image. We do this through exhibitions, guided tours, open studios, through workstations that we have in our premises, and internships for university students or those who are interested in spending time at the foundation. A milestone for AIF has been the digital world, a new platform which is still in development. For those who've accessed it before, know that. It was launched in 2019 and it hosts around 80 out of our collections, so out of the 306 collections. Today, in light of the pandemic and the limitations this has imposed on mobility and events, we see how the platform offers indispensable virtual space that connects our collections to users worldwide. We also value partnerships to grow and learn with others and to share our knowledge. One particular initiative has been the Middle East Photography Preservation Initiative, which lasted for 10 years and which we hope to continue. And this was jointly led in collaboration with the Met, with the University of Delaware, and with the Getty Conservation Institute. And the whole idea is to develop the kind of regional network in this part of the world around preservation through workshops and trainings. We also value knowledge sharing. We impart as much as we also learn from peers in the region, like Beit Ali Ghana or Wikalat Bahna or other partners such as Basement Cultural Foundation in Yemen. As a practice-focused institution, we engage in talks and conversations. We try to share what preoccupies us, and it can be subjects as diverse as access and copyright and archival practices in general. Now, in an ideal world, as you can see, there's so much we can do, and yet we operate in a highly volatile context with multiple risks that affect our operations. To give you a backdrop, for years in the making, Lebanon has been suffering from political bankruptcy and Ponzi financial schemes. And so the recent economic disaster is not so recent. It's been in the making. And it's what led to the nationwide uprising since October 2019. And since then, we've operated under disrupted workflows. We've had severe banking and transaction measures that cripple institutions like ours and other cultural institutions in Lebanon. In March 2020, the pandemic broke out, and well, the rest you know because it's affected all of us worldwide. The difference is that for independent institutions like ours, we have no safety nets and no compensation from public sources. A crisis like the pandemic and its repercussions creates lockdown, and the ensuing lockdowns puts us under existential threat. To add salt to injury, as if we didn't have enough, the August Beirut port explosion came as a huge shock, causing human loss and indescribable material damage to many parts of the city. Just so that you can see from the map, AIF is 800 meters away from the site of the blast. And you've probably heard in the news, over 200 people died, 5,000 wounded, and 300,000 were temporarily homeless. And the losses are estimated at about $10 to $15 billion. Some news compared this disaster to Hiroshima. The US dropped bomb on Hiroshima in 1945, not exactly in its intensity, but in the magnitude and the shock. The cause of which, of course, was the 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate, which was unsafely stored in the port warehouse. But let's not go into further speculation. I want to talk to you about the extent of the damage. The red dots that you see are the areas that were heavily damaged, and AIF is in one of those zones, right where the dot is, where it says site of explosion. And the yellow show the spread of the damage to the city. Luckily, no one was hurt in the team. One colleague was slightly injured, but soon recovered. In terms of damage to our premises, here are a few images. As you can see, there were blown up windows, distorted door frames, impairment of 3 fireproof doors, of the cool storage room, which is where we house our collection. A lot of the computers were dysfunctional, and we had a severely impacted preservation and digitization labs, as you can see. This is our library. It holds over 2,500 references on photography and image practices. And then this is the cool storage room. It's designed to host the collections in a stable, climate-controlled and fire-resistant environment. And it was significantly affected, as you can see. Despite this apocalyptic scene, what is amazing is that the collections were intact. There were only 3 items that were slightly damaged, but the rest was all intact. And this is thanks to the good preservation practices that the team had adopted in recent years, including adequate housing of items inside the boxes, how the boxes are placed in the storage space, depending on size and weight, and how we secure material and shelves with additional support. And yet the shock was huge, and the explosion was a stark reminder of the fragility of such precious archives. Our immediate response following the explosion was to ensure the safety of the team, the physical collection, and the digital surrogates, so the digital copies that are stored on the main drive. Those drives were actually kept in a safe location until they could be brought back. And this was based on a prior agreement with the Sursut Museum. So another example of how sometimes talking to a peer institution helps in these moments of crises. In the midst of debris and dysfunctional working space, we conducted a detailed damage assessment in parallel to cleaning and rehousing the collection, because we had to put them safely back to where they belonged. And it took over 2 months to restore minimum operations with essential temporary repairs so that we could prevent further deterioration to the collections. There was a tremendous show of solidarity from our network of friends. And I want to mention a huge thank you to all those who labored to generate additional donations, especially the MEPI network, but also the many volunteers and supporters who called in. So what did we learn? As I said, we had to face not only an economic disaster, but political upheaval, a pandemic, and then this human-made disaster. And this was only 6 months ago. And so we are constantly learning from direct experience, and we know firsthand how important it is to prepare before a disaster hits. In 2014, and thanks to the grant from the Fund for the International Development of Archives, we came up with a plan, which we now regularly update. And my colleague Rachel Tebet, who's probably with us in the audience, was behind this plan. And together with the team, we're constantly looking at what needs to be further developed. It certainly came in handy during the recent multiple crises that we faced. But then the question is, you know, are emergency plans only relevant for institutions like ours in Beirut? No. And how do we prepare for emergencies? It all depends on the type of institution we're running. What is it that we have that needs protection, along with the team? And it takes a few steps, and to do it ahead of time, which saves the day. What I should say is that through the thick and thin, what has made us go through these crises is and are the flexible donors who've stood by us and have shown flexibility and have offered core support, because without them, we couldn't have had the headspace to respond and to try and recover at the same time. Now, if I were to think of an emergency plan, it can be intimidating and daunting, but actually it's a question of thinking about a few steps and accepting that accounting for every possibility and every risk is just impossible. But one can start with available resources and to know what is our size and what is it that we're capable of, and try to build on that through networks and additional training. So we started small and then we broadened the scope. And the first thing we did is that we said we need to know more about our collection, the building, the premise, our surrounding, the neighborhood, and then the bigger city and the country in general to be able to draw this plan. And so we learned as much as possible about our collections in order to understand what type of materials are we keeping in our custody, and to identify those which are most fragile or may cause a threat to the rest of the collections. Again, as I said, AIF does not function as a conventional archive. And normally in a big museum or a big archival institution, there'd be a whole department just for emergency response. But we're a small team of 7. And this means we have limited funding and limited resources. But on the other hand, we're agile and we're nimble and we're able to create something that fits us and that works for us. So the first thing to do is to situate our operations. Where are our premises? Where are we located? What is the building like? Is it in a good condition? How many exits do we have in case we need to move or escape rapidly? What about our collection? Since we have in our custody this incredibly valuable, precious series of photographic collections, where are they stored? In our case, it's in the school storage room that I just shared with you a few minutes ago. And it's an integral part of AIF's preservation strategy because it adheres to international standards. There's a certain temperature and humidity that needs to be maintained. But what I should say is that we still have over 300,000 photographs awaiting processing and proper housing. And although we keep them in a controlled environment, they are prone to risk. And so we need to understand this dimension of our collection. And then the next step is to chart the risks depending on where you are. If you're in Libya or Egypt or Yemen, you're going to have to look at different risks, but these are some of the ones that make sense to us. And believe me, they're more than enough. So you see armed conflict comes at the very top, but this can be a bomb, it can be gunfire, it can be war, all-out war. And Beirut has a history of natural disasters such as earthquakes and floods. And so all of these we need to take into consideration. And so with all of this in mind, we drafted our own risk assessment chart listing the most likely man-made and natural disasters. And for each risk, we had to define possible mitigation measures. So for instance, if there's an armed conflict or an explosion, how do we get out safely? Do we have an official emergency contact list? What shall we do with the cool storage room if we're not present in the premise and we need to vacate? Where is the evacuation route? These are all essential questions that one needs to ask. It may surprise some of you, but in this day and age, Lebanon still has power cuts. So we can, for about 3 hours a day, go without electricity, which makes us dependent on private generator providers. So we need to verify our UPS systems. We need to install emergency lighting and directional signs. We need to do all this because these are additional pressures on our daily operations. Fire. This is something that every institution needs to be aware of. Is our staff trained on how to use fire extinguishers? Do we know what kind of films and photographs that have cellulose nitrate bases, which is highly combustible? You know, where are they? Where are they placed? How far are they from the other collections? We need to conduct regular fire drills. How often do we really do that? And then earthquakes, as if, again, we don't have enough problems. Lebanon sits on a major fault line. And actually, this can erupt at any time. And so one of the things we've had to do is to stabilize all the shelves in our cool storage room to the walls. We've secured them, as you can see in the image, with rubber ropes, and especially those collections that contain glass plates, which are the most fragile. And again, keeping heavy objects at the bottom and lighter ones on the top. Again, climate conditions, heavy rainfall that we need to account for and make sure that there are no fissures in the windows and the doors and no leakages. And then you have the unexpected risks, you know, the trash crisis in 2015, which is ongoing. This wreaks havoc on anyone who has archives in terms of paper. If you have to think about pests. And so we've had to call the pest control once a month over a period of 3 months during this crisis. Or dust storms. I don't know if any of you remember that 2015, there was a severe dust storm. This means we need to clean out our AC filters and fans and make sure that no dust seeps into the collections. And then, you know, when the explosion, for instance, happened, the entire street of Jemmaize was undergoing repair and reconstruction. The level of noise and dust is unprecedented. But what is more dangerous is that had we had the need to move our collection during that time, it would have been very problematic because there was no access. It was quite limited given the destruction of the city. So the key is to keep up with the plan, prepare it, and then practice the prevention, and then keep practicing and keep reviewing the plan and seeing what roles each team member has and do they understand what they're supposed to do. To update our contact list, again, to do training when it's needed for fire or first aid, and to constantly monitor our collection and equipment. And most significantly is this need to reach out to peers and to our community and discuss and share the plan. If people know what is at stake, and if we talk about what we can do in a moment of crisis, it saves a lot of time and energy because we won't have that time during a crisis. And there's no perfect plan. That's why in the recovery phase that we're in at the moment, we're constantly reviewing what do we need to minimize in terms of hazards and how do we build better the next time. And this is where we are today. So the top priorities, and I will soon end, for AIF and in planning our our recovery phase 6 months after the blast, is this urge and urgent need to relocate to better and bigger spaces, to try and design and develop a mobile and energy efficient cool storage facilities for all the risks that I just mentioned, to try and support and promote locally produced and sourced preservation materials so that we're less dependent on foreign imports, given that dollars are so hard to come by in our local context at the moment, to do preventive conservation of pending collections, those that are also outside of the cool storage room, to boost our digital assets, because this is one of the best preventive measure, but it's also what would help us provide access to our online platform. And most importantly, is public programming. This is something we really want to focus on, because the act of transmission to give our collection a life beyond an object is in itself preventative and is a response to decay and deterioration. To see the collection in the life of an artist's work or a research paper, for instance. And mainly in time for our 25th anniversary in 2022, we're really keen on generating and sharing knowledge about AIF archival practices. And we hope that despite all these multiple crises, we will remain to be able to keep telling these stories. Thank you on behalf of the entire AIF team.
Eva, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and the experiences of suffering from both a global crisis and a citywide crisis at the same point lead to so many questions and such a wealth of experience. I know there'll be so many questions from our audience, and I've got lots to ask you later as well. So thank you very much for sharing that. But we are going to move across now. We gave everyone the impossible task of trying to sum up in 10 minutes what is clearly a lifetime of experience here. So we're going to go next to our friend Hadia Ghana from the Bet Ali Ghana in Tripoli in Libya to share your experiences, please, Hadia.
Hello. Well, I'll more tell you a little story more than a wonderful presentation that did Hiba. I can see myself or present myself as a little sister, Libya as a little sister of Beirut. I always see, the first time I went to Beirut in 2014, I have felt like completely viewing the future of Libya in a way. So for the moment, about 10 years after the revolution in 2011, we have power cuts, of course. We have little wars popping now and then, and this kind of erratic mood swings as a society. Plus, so if I come back to the 2011. It was 9 months. I always say during the rise, in a way, that the population goes against 42 years of dictatorship, and then after this surprise, we started asking ourselves why and how, and who we are after all this. So for myself, I spent this time at home, mostly alone, observing what was happening around, and in a way being afraid of losing memory in a way. So I was writing. If we go back longer than this, I was born in 73 during Gaddafi's time, in a family in a way that is aware of the society, both teachers, trying to keep, in a way, track of how the Libyan society is moving as teachers or as educators. My father was an artist, and his aim was to teach art to other people, not really artists. So he chose, in a way, architects to express this will. So during 42 years or more, he was teaching architects, and in a way, it was his medium to pass on all the memory he could have, or his view of beauty, or his view of what was happening in Libya through his teaching and through his students. So during all these years, until he passed away in 2006, trying to all what was related to Libya, or Libyan crafts, Libyan architecture, Libyan nature in a way, plants and things like that. And I guess it was his fear to lose all this. Libya was before in the 50s, during the Italian or the English reign in a way. It was one of the 5 poorest countries in the world. Then in the 50s, we discovered oil, and it was a boom, of course. And this fourth boom is huge, because it kind of erased the memory, and the oil became the most important thing, and gradually destroyed all the knowledge, the local knowledge. And it brought us, of course, the nice gift that is Gaddafi, in a way, to control all this and, and do the finishing touches. So in 2011, going back to the revolution, my worry was how to keep these sketches and these little scribbles that he had, and how to, in a way, present it or deal with it in a way that it becomes accessible to others, but also that it encourages others to show what they have. We have fear, of course, in after dictatorships or so, everyone is afraid of the other one, and there's a big distrust. So this is bad for archiving usually, because things get buried to protect in a way. They are hidden, and sometimes if they're hidden so well, they tend to disappear. So that's another fear that can be. I can add. I saw the Hiba's lists of destructions like war, natural disasters. For here, it's sad to say, but in a way, here it's also the society is a risk, because we tend to be aggressive with memory, and in a way, it's we have this culture of erasing things that have been done by those before us. Destroying like sculptures. That's a famous thing that happened, but also destructing any trace in a way that have been done before. So, and that also is part of this protective, I don't know, protecting the self, I guess, to show that we are the ones who are doing things and not the others. It's a psychology. So in 2012, I decided to do this foundation, to create this foundation with my family first and close friends of my father and mine. The space is the house, the family house that you see behind me. The house is also part of this memory because of this archive, let's say, because it housed a lot of passing, either from family and from friends or students. And in the memory, it has always been in the common memory of at least all the students and friends of my father. It has been a place that is safe, a place where we can talk, and a place where things are kept. So I thought it would be a nice start to have this house and change it to a cultural house and a little archive of his work. So to have this, let's say, link or community feel to this archiving and protecting the archive, slowly I started doing like a little diary, showing little things like playing more with the sentimentality and playing with the love of the story that we have in Libya, and I guess in a lot of our region. You know, we love soap operas, we love like long Mexican soap operas and things like that, and it becomes a way familiar, and family is very important to our societies. So this soap opera, it's like since 2013 or 14 that it's going on with very simple things like opening a box from the archive and showing photos of my father with friends, from time to time showing some sketches. If there is a special occasion, I show and I tell a little story, and all these things became. Now I realize with the little messages that I have from time to time on private, that it became part of the family, and some kind of got a bit accustomed to check the Facebook, my Facebook page. It's a personal page, to check if what happened today, just like the big brother in a way, and just to see if I'm still alive and if the thing is still going on. So I am aware, for instance, that this journey is very unprofessional in a way, but because it's very scarce, the concept of archiving in Libya, it's in a way very scarce. I can see also with the governmental institution. Now I work since 3 years in a governmental institution that is, its aim is to protect the old city and its archive. We have the exact same problems. I mean, from around 25 years, they protected it a bit like a prison-like institutions, and now we realize, and some have been stolen. We still have the problem of the decay itself, and now we are in ground zero. So should we make it completely public? Should we show it? If we make it completely public, then would we have copyrights in it? Importance of copyrights, and so we still full of questions really, and yeah. So it would be interesting to see how others deal with this question.
Thank you very much, Alia. And wherever we are in the world and however big our institutions or organizations are, we share the same problems and we have the same questions, I think. So thank you very much for sharing those with us. And I know, again, there'll be lots of questions coming in for you later. But I want to pass now to our friends from Egypt, from Alexandria, to Ali Hussein Al-Adawa and to Yasmin Hussein, from the Bena for Arts in Alexandria, Egypt. Ali, over to you, please.
Yeah, Thank you, Vernon, and thank you, everyone. I will make a very short introduction to the وكالة بهنا, quite related also to the history of the space that we are functioning through or working from. That it's an art space located in the very downtown of Alexandria in El Manchea Square, which is a historical until now commercial center in Alexandria. And it started, the company itself, which is Behna Film Selections Company, from the Behna family, that they are coming from Iraq through Syria and then reached Alexandria by the end of 19th century. The building that we are working, the space, we have it in the building, it's an Italian building from the 19th century. And it's a very old building, and the space itself it has so many layers of the city of Alexandria itself. And they started their business, their film business, in distribution and production since 1932. And they were working in distribution and production with a different genre of film in till 62. Then 62, the whole film industry in Egypt was nationalized and put under the protection. And then to cut it short briefly, the whole laws of nationalization changed by end of 70s and 80s. And the one who started the whole work of Behna Space, وكالة Behna project, was Basile Behna. He's a art support and art collector from Alexandria, and he's a descendant of the family that make this struggle in courts, in different courts, and got the different collections from papers to photos to the space itself by 2011. And with the work and with the help and support of Godran Association in Alexandria at the time, they started a project of renovation of the space, and they start a pilot project for the space from 2014 till 2018 with a certain focus on film screenings, different attempts to work on the archives, and also for more plastic art shows and exhibitions. By 2019, we have a total different managerial level and curatorial level, on the managerial and curatorial level, because we work as an art space on the intersection between the epistemic sphere, if you could say, and the artistic sphere, between cinema and contemporary art practices and different theoretical discourses related to the how to connect, how to think of archives for the future. Mainly, that it's how to start from archives to speculate or to build a future. For the thing is that this is the whole, in the curatorial level, our main focus since 2019, we work on a project on the labor images, and we have a project on the in museums and museology, and also, and this is all inspired from the collection of films distributed by Behna. For example, the labor images, that we have a very important film in the film history, in the Egyptian film history, called The Worker. It's a production of 1943 that we have all the materials of it, but we don't have the film itself. Also, for the science fiction, thinking of the Arab Egyptian science fiction productions, it's also related to the productions of Behna in 50s of the film called Journey to Moon. And the more work of the whole work of these archives, what we have of the archives and different collections we have of the archive, I think I will hand to Yasmin. She will focus more on the collection itself and what how we think of it and how the different aspects of the archive we have in Behna. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Okay. Yes. Okay, so we have in our collection 12,000 photographs of old films, as well as advertisement, posters, and printed material. After visiting the Egyptian National Museum, Basile Behna realized the lack of the documentation from this decade, the 30s and 40s in Egypt. This indicates the importance of our archive for the history of the cinema in the Arab world. And he started the work to make this archive available for public. So we have in the archive material are stored on wooden shelves distributed in 3 rooms in Behna office. They are mostly written in French, Arabic, some Italian, and transcribed and handwritten, and mostly stored in cartoons files. You can see some of the material. The actual situation is a little bit difficult, as we know that we have 148 meters of written material, photos, and promotional archive contained in Behna and in the private apartment of Basile Behna. In the first room, we have 73 meters of written files. In the second room, we have 53 meters of written files and advertising material and photograph. In the third room, we have 5 meters written material, advertising material, photograph, promotional stack on paperboard. The state of the conservation is very bad. Actually, in Behna, the temperature is 31, and normally it wished for 19. And we have an alarming state of conservation, important index of presence of insects, visible trace of attack of rodent, and deterioration of some documents. We can see the damage for the photos and the situation for the papers. The situation is a little bit better in Basile Behna apartment, private apartment. Here we have 19 meters of written and photographic and the promotional material files. The state of conservation is a little bit better, but the document still very dusty and index of contamination and the presence of insects. The temperature is 26, and normally it's wished to be 19. But Basile Behna, he started already the classification in his apartment and concerning the advertising material and poster and photos. According to the following criteria, he make pioneer women, pioneer men, director, and the producers. In 2017, we have a visit from Cinémathèque France, and they make the recommendation. The recommendation of the Cinémathèque prior to the study of the conservation and the restoration of the archive to be made by a team made of specialists in restoration of paper, graphic works, photographic works, and biologists. And then precisely quantify the existing material, classify the material by medium, analyze the state of conservation, study the need for asset management, and of course, a team training. Cinémathèque, in the report, they make an estimated budget more than €1 million, and estimated time is for 5 years. Of course, this is huge, and we cannot just wait to find the budget and to start. So we try to start with small budget, and we start with what is available right now. So what we are doing now this year with a very, very small budget is to making like a cold room to be a fire resistant condition. Although we don't have a professional conservator or preservation staff until now, but with this small effort, we need to preserve the collection so that it would be available to use when it needed. So we start to isolate the ground and the walls, replace the wooden organic shelves with metal shelves, and use a powerful air condition to keep the material at 19 degrees with humidity maintained below 30%. And we try with our small effort to the material to be stored under controlled environment condition appropriate to its need. We cannot wait, if not, we will lose the material. In the same time, we make a call for a volunteer team to know more about our material, what kind of material exactly, the numbers, counting, the estimating, how many photos we have, posters, written document, and what we have exactly, and divide it into categories and themes. And at the same time, of course, clean as we can from the dust and insects and all this. At the same time, like my colleague Ali said, we are making activities related to the archive. So if we cannot, but till now, we don't have like a museum for the archive because we need a budget and we need a lot of work, but the archive is also available for researchers, for artists, for specialists, and to be a base to make activities from this the archive. Our plan, of course, is to realize the diffusion and access to by people who like the cinema, who are interested in history of cinema, to the archive, and of course for specialists, artists, and researchers. So we are thinking of access and diffusion on 3 levels, like a museum exhibition of the original pieces with restricted and controlled access to the researcher, artist, and specialist. And then in another level, offline digitalizing access on computer at Behna with high quality, and to develop an online consultation tools, inventories, and database for online. What we need actually is, of course, we need a partnership. So we are looking for partnerships with experts. We welcome also volunteers. We need the team training and, of course, funds. And I think we will not wait for huge funds. We will start every step with small funds to make step by step. Thank you.
Yasmin, thank you very much, and Ali as well for sharing that. It's incredibly useful experience. And can I just start some questions now? Actually, one of the last points there was a desire for partnership, and this has come up a couple of times in the chat with proposals about partnerships, and especially thinking about the digitalization of collections, and whether, of course, that brings with it its own need for preservation and care, the digital copy. And there's a proposal from one of our audience that local regional partnerships may be a way forward with digitalization to decentralize copies, digital copies. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've experienced. Or maybe I'll start with Heber. I think you mentioned particularly a digitalization program there.
Yeah. Thank you, Vernon, and thank you for the question. I think the point is well taken, and something that we're practicing at AIF, in the sense that when we digitize, we make sure that there are various copies that are on-site, off-site, that are regularly updated to safeguard any of the material that we're digitizing. So we already practice that. We even have a copy that's outside of the country, just to make sure that whatever happens, we're covered. And in that sense, this is our way of decentralizing. But that said, the amount of photographic objects that we have at our disposal warrants an entire revision of our digital assets management and space.
Thank you. And maybe if I can turn next to Yasmin or Ali to discuss your experience of digitalization, whether that's something that you are engaging upon and whether you've had any particular issues or concerns with it.
Of course, we consider digitalization, but actually we didn't start yet. We start with a very, very small amount in Behna, in Basile Behna apartment, but it needs a lot of equipment and time and people, and that we don't have till now. But this is in our plan for sure.
Thank you. And then Hadia, looking at the different needs of protecting objects of different things, you mentioned very much about the house being a part of the collection, a part of the institution. And how do you go about balancing the needs of the objects themselves, the buildings that are part of your organization, and then digital copies or copies of those objects if they exist? How do you decide which is the most important? How do you prioritize them? What process do you go through?
Well, I work in parallel in a way, because I mean the house will be a cultural center where the objects and work will be exhibited in like in a museum. But in the same time, I've started since 2011 to make photographs of, for instance, oil and scanning. So it's still basic. I always say it, but it's a first stage to digitalization and trying to protect the work. So the cloud, we've just done a Google account and we're saving our things there. So. And I have also a copy sent to my sister who's in France. So we have a branch in a Beit Ali Ghana in France as well. So yeah, in a way we're trying to like make a bridge between the two countries. Yeah, I go with the fact that the more people know about things, the more it's protected in a way.
And Rachel's actually asked me to expand upon my question there and to include very much the intangible nature of your organization as an open civic space and how you would protect that and the memory of the organization.
Yes, but it's I would say the whole organization, the whole idea of the Beit Ali Ghana is it's group memory. It's what I've said with this soap opera type of entry to the society. It's trying to trigger a community resurrection in a way, or revive the memory of the community. So for instance, one of the like the how you call that, the talked memory in a way. For instance, I want to do a biography of my father, but collecting little stories from either his friends, his students, so that everybody is part of this it's also archiving little stories, anecdotes, memories, and it will all be part of either a digital form as sound or typewritten, but it will also be um, either a book or something like tangible. There's also to me there's a problem with having everything untangible. We live in a desertic country here, so everything is already very intangible, very ephemeral. So having everything on digital is a bit frightening in a way. Here, I think people need some structure and some basis to start from at least. So that's why I need the house or this space to have this space.
Excellent, thank you. And I have a question from the audience. I'm sorry, I can't see the name on these questions when they come through, but maybe I'll start with Ali. But it's to all of our speakers today, and I'll read it. How do you think we need to redress our relationship with the past, the archive more specifically in the Middle East? It says, I'm born in 1995, so much younger than me, and I sense among my generation a lot of frustration where the present and the future seem to be the most urgent things to hold on to in order to fix the damage and move on. How do you recommend that we look at the past in a more productive way, and what needs to shift in how we socially relate to the past? So it's a question. Maybe we can start with Ali, and then for the rest of our speakers.
Thank you for the question. It's a very important question and big question also, but also so much related to what we are trying to do in Behna, and especially in Behna in Alexandria, which is a city so much connected to the past, more than any something else, like more than present, more than thinking of the future. The thing is, what kind of feelings, what kind of different relationships we are thinking to construct, to imagine, to build with the past, because it's only but always the traditional, but also the dominant in the Egyptian context. I may say that it's always like that. It was always better in the past. Like you cannot. And this is also so much related to what you are experiencing in the moment. What other people tell you about, what other people experience it, what film industry you could see in terms of number, even it was always better in past. But through building these archives, because we are still in the very, very beginning of that, we try to build these archives to construct different feelings, different relationships to the past. Because in a way, I take it very, very radical ways, you need to build this past in order to let it go, to leave it for the future. Because for example, I'm thinking of we build this archive in Behna, you could easily see how you could construct a map of audiences of the different places of cinemas, of movie theaters in Egypt, which was a huge mapping of, and now it's a very, very few. To start a research, start artistic project on this mapping, to starting thinking of the relationship between audiences, not only in the central cities, but also in Upper Egypt, in different places through the relationship to photographs. The photographs was used as a publicity in the cinemas, that you could see this. How you could build a relationship of people, how there is a lot of people love this film and other does not go and love this film, and all of this. Thinking of the political economy of film industry at the time, thinking of the relationship of audience of this is something that we really could construct, of thinking of a future. But to do this, we need what I think that we need to build these archives, to build these histories, in order to find out, to make the effort to find the submerged histories, if I could say, or the submerged archives that it's totally we cannot, we barely could touch on and find it materialistic in a way.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you so much. We've just a couple of minutes left. Would anyone else like to come in quickly on that question?
Can I just to complement what Ali's saying, I think the relevance of protecting and safeguarding archives, be they photographs or documents or films, is precisely because we owe it to the next generation that they have access to this kind of information, whether it's a sound or an image or a written word. And the idea is not, as Ali said, it's not to pass down what we consider are the ideal values or the principles that we need to hold on to, but rather to allow for reinterpretation of some historical moments, of some sentiments, of issues that one can understand only by looking at the past in order to be able to move forward. And in our region, for instance, most people who look at the news today are hit by either despair or catastrophic news of any of our countries. And that's a sad fact, because actually there was a phase and there was an era where society functioned differently. There was a time also when there were a lot of conservative views on things. And the whole idea is to show how cyclical history can be, and images can do that, and drawings and music. In our part of the world, just looking at how in relation to women's role in society, without any kind of value judgment, but just to understand that it hasn't always been what it is today, and to allow young people the chance to look, interpret, provoke, and question, and put our generation to the test in looking at all these archives, is what makes us tick. That's why we work in these places. It's not to put them in a museum and close the cupboard and then, you know, let the dust settle on them. It's to revive them. It's to provoke.
Thank you so much. We've run out of time, or very nearly. We need to start closing, which is a shame, because there's so much more that I know we could be discussing. And I have a feeling that our work won't be finished here, actually. I think there's a recurring theme in the chat talking about the need for regional and local partners to host and mirror digital archives, the need to address the decentralization and digitalization needs with decolonization needs as well. And so I think there's conversations there and connections, and that's what I think Culture in Crisis is about. It's about making those networks, putting people in contact with each other and allowing them to go away and make do great work together. There's one additional announcement I need to make before we close the session today. The event today has been organised in collaboration with the V&A's Middle East Department, who will lead on the second strand of this project. And the next phase continues our partnership with our friends at the Arab Image Foundation, but hands the mic off to creative practitioners in Lebanon. And it will take the form of a series of digital commissions from artists, writers and researchers based in Beirut. And these will live on the V&A's website. So watch this space in the future for that second phase of our collaboration. And like I say, I feel from our audience today and our speakers, there's a real need to make some connections, and we'll pass all of those details on so that you can make those personal connections and hopefully continue the good work together. So that all that leads me to do is to thank our friends and partners today from the institutions for sharing their contributions with us in the last hour or so. To thank Laura and Rachel again for making everything possible, and also to thank our amazing audience for being involved and engaged within this project. And I do hope that those of you who haven't will join the Culture and Crisis mailing list so that we can meet again on another occasion. So one last thank you. I'm sure they're all standing up and applauding you, but you can't hear them because their mics are silenced. But thank you again, Heba, Hadia, Ali, and Yasmin, for your contributions today. And wishing you all a safe and pleasant evening. Good night.